Hey scholars, in this lesson we're going to be exploring ordered pairs in real-world contexts. So we're going to have to interpret the meaning of a point based on what we see it. So let's start off with an example where we're going to explore a graph about account balance. So I'm going to read it and also annotate my question to show you what you should do when you read a question aligned to this topic. So this graph shows the balance in a bank account over a period of 14 days. The axis labeled B represents account balance in dollars. So let's write that. This here axis, the y-axis, represents account balance in dollars. And then it says the axis labeled D represents the day. So I'm going to label that too. This axis represents the day. And therefore, when we find ordered pairs today, we're going to think about what is that story telling us about that point. So here's an example of that. It says, estimate the greatest account balance. Okay? So we're going to try to find the point that represents the greatest account balance. On what day did it occur, and write it as an ordered pair. So let's think about that. Where on this graph would be the greatest account balance? And I see account balance aligns to the Y value. So I'm going to find that point and highlight it. And I see the highest point is right here. I'm going to ask myself, what would this point mean based on the graph? I see an D value, which is the x-axis of 14, and I see a Y value, which is between 350 and 400, which I know between that is 375. So I'm going to write that. This point is 14,375. And we have to ask ourselves, what would this point mean based on the context of the graph? And it means that 14 is the day, and 375 is the account balance. So I'm going to say on day 14, the account balance was $375. Therefore, now there's a meaning behind the point. So here's my next question then. Estimate the least account balance. So I'm going to use a different color. I want to find now the least balance. If I look at my graph, I see the balance is right here at this lowest point, and we're going to estimate it. I see the X value or D value is 11, and then the point is a little bit before negative 100. So I'm going to roughly ballpark that to be about maybe negative, I'm going to say 90. So therefore, this point is 11, negative 90. So I have to ask myself, what does this point mean in this context? And I know the X value is the day, and the Y value is the account balance. So I can say, on day 11, the account balance was negative $90, which means that you're in debt. You actually owe $90 to the bank. So using that thinking, I want you now to do the last question, 3, to yourself. What does the point 6, negative 50 mean about the account balance? This point right here on the graph. So pause here just to think, and then we're going to continue when we go over the answer. Alright, so if I was going to interpret that, I would write on day 6, the account balance was negative $50. Alright, let's move into our next story, which has a different context, but we're going to do the similar steps. And it's about high and low temperatures. So this time, the coordinate plane shows the high and low temperatures in Nome, Alaska over a period of 8 days. The axis labeled T represents temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit. So let's label that. This axis here is temperature in degrees Fahrenheit. And it says that the axis labeled D represents the day. So this axis here is going to be day. So it's going to be the same questions. We're going to find out the warmest high temperature and write as an ordered pair, and then find the coldest low temperature and write an ordered pair. So I'm going to highlight them here for you. I see a highest point here and a lowest point down here. I want you now to write the ordered pairs for 1 and 2 and then describe them in a sentence, and then I'm going to go over them after the pause in the video. Alright, here are the answers for 1 and 2. For number 1, it was a point of 1, 28. So that stands for the warmest high temperature was 28 degrees Fahrenheit on day 1. And then the coldest temperature was 7, -3. So the coldest low temperature was -3 degrees Fahrenheit on day 7. We have one more example to go, and this is one you're going to do independently. So I'm going to give you some support before we start, and then you're going to go from there. So it says here the following. The x-axis represents the number of hours before or after noon. So let's annotate that. This is hours before or after noon. Just for us to remember, noon is 12 p.m. So this is before noon. This is after noon. Okay? And then it says that the y-axis is temperature in degrees Celsius. So I'm going to write that annotation here. Y-axis is temperature in degrees Celsius. So right now it's asking for the following. At 9, thinking about temperature, this is going to be above freezing. And then below freezing. So right now you're going to answer the question. I'm going to do A, and then you're going to do B. So A says, at 9 a.m. it was below freezing. In what quadrant would I be? So therefore, I want to analyze two things. I know that 9 a.m. is before noon, and I want to be below freezing. So these both have a negative connotation. So therefore my point would be negative, which would mean it is in quadrant 3. And if I were to write an ordered pair for this, thinking about this, 9 a.m. is 3 hours before noon. So that's -3 for x. And I just got to write some temperature that's going to be freezing below 0. So I'm just going to write down -5. And this is an example of an ordered pair that would make this work. -3 meaning 3 hours before noon, and then -5 being a below freezing temperature. So you're going to answer number letter B and C on your own, and then check the work after you pause in the video. Here are the answers for B and C. B says at 11 a.m. it was 10 degrees Celsius. So 11 a.m. is before noon by 1 hour, so it's -1 for x. And the temperature is 10, so therefore the y value is +10, above freezing. So my order pair is -1, 10. And then for C, it's asking us, what does 00 stand for in this context? We know that 0 stands for freezing. We know that 0 stands for noon. So therefore, 00 represents a temperature of 0 degrees Celsius at 12 p.m. Alright, you have finished all 3 videos now. You can now take your X ticket for this lesson. Post on Google Classroom.